Okay, welcome back. We're going to talk about the effect of tax on economic, if I could spell it, economic welfare. This is not social welfare, it's economic welfare. This is coming out of chapter 8 of Mankiw's text on microeconomics. What you will see here is a figure from that chapter, and it's a simple supply and demand, but we've labeled the areas of consumer and producer surplus. And so from our previous chapter, when we're talking about economic welfare, you can identify the effects on economic welfare before and after a tax. So let's start with the graph itself. I mean, obviously this is zero, this is a lot in terms of quantity, this is low, this is high price. And when we introduce a tax, we put in a tax wedge in between the demand and supply curve there. The wedge is right in there, and that's actually the size of the tax. Now, I've gotten a few questions about, hey, how do we derive that tax wedge? Go back and look at my previous lectures on supply, demand, and government policy, and you'll see a breakdown of how that tax wedge gets derived. So we do know that consumer surplus is everything above price and below the demand curve. So let's assume that tax wedge in green there is not there right now. And let's see, what is our consumer surplus? Well, everything above price, this is our market value price. This is after the tax, price that buyers pay, price that sellers get. But we're pretending like the tax isn't in there. Everything above price and below the demand curve. So you can see here that your consumer surplus would be area A plus B plus C. Everything above price and below the demand curve. So consumer surplus then is A plus B plus C. All right. And what is our producer surplus? Again, no tax right now, so everything below price and above the supply curve. Below price and above the supply curve is consumer surplus. So that's areas D, E, and F. So your producer surplus would D plus E plus F. And your total surplus, well, first of all, if there's no tax, there's no tax revenue. So your total surplus without a tax is going to be consumer surplus plus producer surplus. So we are A plus B plus C plus D plus E plus F. That's how well off you are. Okay, that's your complete economic welfare with the surplus. Now, let's introduce a tax. So when we introduce a tax, again, the wedge comes in. Again, if you want to see that derive, flip back to my video on supply, demand, and government policy. You have a tax wedge here. That is the size of the tax. And so the height of it is the size of the tax. It's the difference between the price the sellers take and the price that the buyers pay. This height right here is the size of the tax. So for example, if this were $5 and that was $7, it'd be a $2 tax. We then, to get tax revenue, we'd actually multiply it then by the quantity. Now notice pre-tax, our quantity was over here. It was less expensive. Post-tax, it's more expensive because of the tax, so people buy less, so your post-tax quantity moves back here. The height of this box is the tax wedge, that's the size of the tax, and the width of this box is your post-tax quantity. So follow that way for a second. What is my consumer surplus then after the tax? Well, it's everything above price and below the demand curve. But you have to remember who's our consumers. Well, that's the buyer. And so their new price after the tax is here. And so everything above price and below the demand curve. Above price and below the demand curve. Their new consumer surplus then is A. Area A. Now, okay, let's do producer surplus. Well, we remember everything producer surplus is below price and above the supply curve. Below price, above the supply curve. Below price, above the supply curve. Area F. Okay? And I'm going to add a column over here. Hey, what changed? All right. So for consumer, what changed? Well, they had A, B, C. Now they only have A, so they are minus B plus C. Okay, they are minus B plus C. All right, now let's look at producer surplus. We went from D, E, F to just F. Everything below price and above the supply curve is what the consumer or what the producer rather in this situation takes home. So they lost D and E. So you do minus D plus E. They are minus D plus E. All right. So that's what's changed. Little divider in there. Now, tax revenue. What is that? Well, remember we said the tax revenue is the size of the tax, which is the tax wedge, this height. So if this is $7 and this is $5, that's $2. If this is 7 and that's 5, the height there is 2. Okay, and the market value, let's say, is 6. You go to Walmart and you get $5 in your wallet, you got $6 in your wallet, and you want to check out with something that has a price tag, a market value of $6. You don't have enough because you got to pay that extra tax. The producer takes a little less, the consumer pays a little more. Height of that tax is $2 in this situation. Quantity, let's say, is 10 units. You would then have a size of a tax that would be $2 times 10 units. It's a $20 tax. Well, graphically, what is that? Well, graphically, this tax revenue is the height of this box, and the width of it's the quantity. The size of the tax, the quantity of the tax, post-tax, right? So this box right here, that's tax revenue. It's the size of the tax, $2 in this instance. It's the quantity that is taxed, 10 units, $20. Tax revenue here then is B plus D. B plus D. This area plus that area is tax revenue. Now, what has changed there? Well, you got plus B plus D. All right. Now, can taxes be used for good things? Swallow hard. Allegedly. Total surplus is consumer surplus plus producer surplus plus tax revenue. Okay? Total surplus plus is consumer surplus plus producer surplus plus tax revenue. Make sure you guys can see all this over here in this corner. I can't quite tell when I'm recording here. I want to make sure you're getting everything. There you go. All right. Total surplus is consumer surplus plus producer surplus plus tax revenue. You and I both know, well, we waste some tax revenue dollars. We do plenty. But ideally, they use it for good stuff. So your total surplus then would be A plus B plus D plus F. Your consumer surplus A, your tax revenue B and D, and your producer surplus F. So your total surplus will equal A plus B plus D plus F. All right. What changed? What did we lose? Well, we lost C plus E. All right. And that is known as a deadweight loss. So C plus E is a deadweight loss. All right. This market no longer uses this area right here. Taxes did that, man. This is lost. We don't operate at this quantity anymore. We don't operate at that price anymore. We operate at a price for buyers, price for sellers. All right? We are not in equilibrium. We're in disequilibrium. Thank you, Mr. Taxman. That's inefficient. All right? So when you have disequilibrium, you're going to have something called deadweight loss. That means stuff that you've lost. So in terms of economic welfare of the society, tax made us worse off by area C plus E, which is the deadweight loss. Bummer. Even my libertarian tendencies, taxes can do some good things. I like to be able to call 911 and people answer. All right, I like, for there to be fire and police and national defense and that type of stuff. But it does draw lines on my graph. There are costs to that. So you have to balance equity, equality, equity, economic equity, and efficiency. The most efficient spot on this graph is right there. Everything else is disequilibrium. So it's a trade-off. The cost of what you get is what you give up.